Hi, everyone. Sorry, I had other streams blaring in my ears. So, I have submitted the new cover and hopefully the updated version of As Told By. So, hopefully get past this time my Amazon. Otherwise, it'll be another pain in my tail. Get things released. There's absolutely no reason I can think of they would stop it from happening this time. I even have a fully laid out copyright page. It's like the only thing they've complained about so far is the title. Which, honesty, is a really stupid thing to complain about because it literally tells what the book is. But we will see. And again, we will see. I'm not sure if I want to test sound alerts tonight or not. Because honestly, they haven't been working anyway. I don't know. No one's checked in yet, so I don't know if that went out or not. I did, however, go through my speaker that shouldn't have anything going through it anyway, which is just confusing as hell. So I don't know what my computer is doing. I don't know what my speakers are doing. I don't know what any of my audio is doing at all at the moment. So, how's everyone else's week been? Hopefully you've all had a pleasant week. See if I can add my speaker, so hopefully it'll clear it out. Because honestly, it is really too hot for me to sit here without having the fan on me. Oh, how the dog doing isn't working. Dang it. I'm so close to just not dealing with sound alerts at all. Wouldn't be the first time I've done it. Probably won't be the last time I've done it. But we're doing fairy tales tonight, so I'm trying to stay nice and calm. No. Not huff and puff too much. I did go on another book hunt today. I found one book titled 50 Famous Fairy Tales, which is a Whitman publication. So it's from the 50s. I found a copy of Encyclopedia Brown, which, if no one out there has read Encyclopedia Brown, it's pretty much one of the first books I really started checking out from the library and reading extensively. I'm having to move my microphone around, so sorry. But finding one of the Encyclopedia Brown books was pretty cool. It's oddly enough, they're not hard to find. Book is this? I keep finding random books on my desk. Child Library Reader's Primer. Where did this one come from? Oh, well, apparently published for the state. Let's see. Mrs. Rabbit's Thanksgiving. Who saw Santa Claus? The best day. Throwing the ball. The Laughing Fairy. Rain, Go Away. Oh, that's in here. Cool. The Sandman. The actual story of the Sandman. The Wind. Little, wait a minute. Nice. Oh, Chicken Little's in here. Three Bears. The Cock, the Hen, and the Mouse. Alice and the Milk. Doesn't sound familiar to me. Let's see, the bird who would not sing. The blackbirds, the chickadee. The two kittens. The little gray squirrel. Blow, wind, blow. Three rabbits. This is a book from 1923. And I don't remember from where I got it. Gonna guess an estate sale. There's a silent reading picture story. Oh, wow. That's... Okay, I think I got this one because it had the Sandman story in it. So I got this one 4 weeks ago, I think. I'll have to do a recording of this one. Ooh, pages are torn. I'll have to fix that. Of course, it's torn in Three Bears. Now, let's get this right, everyone. It's not Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's called The Three Bears. Oh. Chicken Little is such a fun story. Maybe some other time I'll get to this one. I need to talk to my friend Beastie about seeing about getting book stickers. Because I want to go through and put book plates in all my books. Because reasons. Just a little sticker, maybe a 2x3 at the largest. Just ones that says, from the library of the Wolf Storyteller. Go through and put it in all my books. And if anything ever happens to me and people have to sell my books, they'll see the sticker in there going, "Who is the Wolf Storyteller?" And hopefully they will try to find out about me. I would really like to leave a lasting legacy of memories. I'd really like to leave a lasting legacy of my books. It's pretty much my one real goal in life, to be remembered. Because as long as I know that someone remembers me, I will live forever. And if I can live in the hearts and minds of children and other readers out there, that would be the best way for me to do it. I mean, it's not a hard goal, is it? It's just to be remembered. Just, as my editor put it, my life goal was to be an asterisk. To be a footnote. That's it. Just a footnote. Some vague reference people may look up at one point in time. I mean, it really does seem like it should be a simple goal, right? I mean, with the way the internet goes, you can do a search for my name and you'll find Kentron Valkyrie everywhere. So, I guess technically I've already reached that goal. But to really be known, that even a stranger who's never met me would just go, Kentron Valkyrie, isn't he that wolf that tells stories? But I digress. And it is 10 minutes past the hour, so we should probably go to the library. And here we are. Okay. I'm not sure how well everyone can hear me because there's no one to tell me if I'm too quiet or not. So I'm going to try to be as enunciating as possible. And a reminder that we are past the halfway point in this book, so we have gone past beauty, and we will be telling more stories of beasts. And honestly, I like beast stories for no particular reason other than being a beast. Well, I guess that's a particular reason, honestly, is, I like telling beast stories because I am a beast. So we are going to get into this, hopefully, soon. Trying to do a few minor adjustments. Trying to make it so I can see chat more and have it on the other side of my screen as opposed to up here. Okay. And I really do apologize if you hear my fan. I'm trying to make it as unobtrusive as possible. Try one more thing real quick. Hopefully I won't knock anything else over. I say as I knock something over. Okay. The wind won't blow the mic if the wind can't get to the mic, right? So, check one more thing. Okay, I hear myself pretty well on playback. Alright then. Well, since we're already a little behind, try not to become a big behind. Sorry, that's just... I don't know what I'm doing. Well, you should know that by now. I will never claim to know what I'm doing, other than I'm trying my damnedest to exist. So, just... Okay, I don't have a way to mark my starting points. I'll figure it out later. The first story for this evening is I Know What I Have Learned, as found in the Pink Fairy book. There once was a man who had 3 daughters, and they were all married to trolls who lived underground. One day the man thought he would pay them a visit, and his wife gave him some dry bread to eat on the way. After he walked some distance, he grew both tired and hungry, and he sat down on the east side of a mound and began to eat his dry bread. The mound then opened, and his youngest daughter came out of it and said, "My father, why are you not coming in to see me?" "Oh," said he, "if I had known that you lived here, and had seen any entrance, I would have come in." Then he entered the mound along with her. The troll came home soon after this, and his wife told him that her father was come, and asked him to go and buy some beef to make broth. "We can get it easier than that," said the troll. So he fixed an iron spike into one of the beams of the roof, and ran his head against it until he had knocked several large pieces off of his head. He was just as well as ever after doing this, and they got their broth without any further trouble. The troll then gave the old man a sack full of money, and laden with this, he betook himself homewards. When he came home, he remembered that he had a cow about to calve, so he laid down the money on the ground. He ran as fast as he could home, and asked his wife whether the cow had calved yet. "What kind of a hurry is this to come home in?" she said. "No, the cow has not calved yet." "Then you must come out and help me with the sackful of money," said the man. "A sackful of money?" cried his wife. "Yes, a sackful of money," he said. "Is that so very wonderful?" His wife did not believe him very much of what he told her, but she humored him and went out with him. When they came to the spot where he had left it, there was no money. A thief had come along and stolen it. His wife then grew angry and scolded him heartily. "Well, well," he said, "hang the money, I know what I have learned." "What have you learned?" said she. "Ah, I know that," said the man. After some time had passed, the man had a mind to visit his second eldest daughter. His wife again gave him some dry bread to eat, and then he grew tired and hungry, and he sat down on the east side of a mound and began to eat it. As he sat there, his daughter came up out of the mound and invited him to come inside, which he did very willingly. Soon after this, the troll came home. It was dark by that time, and his wife bade him go and buy some candles. "Oh, we shall soon get light," said the troll. With that, he dipped his fingers into the fire, and then they gave light without being burned in the least. The old man got 2 sacks of money here and plodded away homeward with ease. When he was very near home again, he thought of the cow that was the calf. So he laid down the money, ran home, and asked his wife whether the cow had calved yet. "Whatever is the matter with you?" she said. "You come hurrying as if the whole house was about to fall. You may set your mind to rest. The cow has not calved yet." I'm getting that going. The man now asked her to come and help him home with the 2 sacks of money. She did not believe him very much, but he continued to assure her that it was quite true, till at last she gave in and went with him. When they came to the spot, there he had again had theft, and the money was gone. It was no wonder that the woman was angry about this. But the man only said, "Ah, if you only knew what I have learned." A third time the man set out to visit his eldest daughter. When he came to a mound and sat down on the east side of it, and ate his dry bread, which his wife had given him to take with him, the daughter came out of the mound and invited her father inside. It was the troll that came home, and his wife asked him to go and buy some fish. "We can get them much easier than that," said the troll. "Give me your dough trowel and your ladle." They seated themselves on the trough and rowed out to the lake, which was beside the mound. When they got there, a little way out, the troll said to his wife, "Are my eyes green?" "No, not yet," she said. He rowed a little further and asked again, "Are my eyes not green yet?" "Yes," said his wife. "They're green now." Then the troll sprang into the water and ladled up so many fish that in a short time the trough could hold no more. Then they rowed home again and had a good meal off of the fish. The old man now got 3 sacks full of money and set off home with him. When he was almost home, the cow again came to his mind, and he laid down the money. This time, however, he took his wooden shoes and laid them above the money, thinking that no one would take it after that. Then he ran home and asked his wife whether the cow had calved. It had not, and she scolded him again for behaving this way, but in the end he persuaded her to go with him to help him with the 3 sacks of money. When they came to the spot, they found only the wooden shoes, for the thief had come along in the meantime and had taken all the money. That woman was very angry and broke out upon her husband, but he took it all very quietly and said only, "Hang the money. I know what I've learned." "What have you learned? I should like to know," said his wife. "You will see that yet," said the man. One day his wife took a fancy for some broth, and said to him, "Oh, go to the village and buy a piece of beef to make broth." "There's no need of that," he said. "We can get it an easier way." With that he drove a spike into a beam and ran his head against it, and, in consequence, had to lie in bed for a long time afterwards. After he had recovered from this, his wife asked him one day to go buy some candles, as they had none. No, he said, there's no need for that. And he stuck his hand into the fire. This also made him take to bed for a good while. When he had got better again, his wife one day wanted fish, and asked him to go and buy some. The man, however, wished again to show what he had learned, so he asked her to come along with him and bring her dough trough and a ladle. They both seated themselves in this and rowed out upon the lake. When they got a little way out, the man said, "Are my eyes green?" "No," said his wife. "Why should they be?" They rowed a little further out, and he asked again, "Are my eyes not green yet?" "What nonsense is this?" she said. "Why should they be green?" "Oh, my dear," he said, "can't you just say that they're green?" "Very well," she said, "they are green." As soon as he heard this, he sprang into the water with a ladle for the fishes. But he just got leave to stay there with them. What did he learn? He obviously is not a troll. Oh, yeah. Okay. I am going to run the ads again for the hell of it. Just because I really don't want the ads to interrupt the stories. Because you guys are here for the stories, and I'll just do a minute. Okay? And we'll try again. Be back in a minute, okay? Oh, that is awesome. After roll a minute of ads, keeps pre-roll out for 56 minutes. So, technically, I guess, if I do a minute of ads between stories, the rest will be safe, right? Because if I get an hour of no pre-roll, if I run ads myself, I may do that now. And it's only a minute, so it's not that much, really. Okay. I guess we're back from the ads. So let's get into the second story. I'm just going to talk through the ads anyway. So. But I don't want the ads interrupting stories. And now that I'm doing this, I may do it that way just to save everyone else's issues. Okay. So, our next story, which I will probably mispronounce his name wrong, will be Alphege, or the Green Monkey, as told in the Yellow Fairy book. Many years ago, there lived a king who was twice married. His first wife was a good and beautiful woman, and died at birth of her little son. And the king, her husband, was so overwhelmed with grief at her loss that his only comfort was in the sight of his heir. When the time for the prince's young christening came, the king chose as a godmother a neighboring princess, so celebrated for her wisdom and goodness that she was commonly called the Good Queen. She named the baby Alphege, and from that moment took him to her heart. Time wipes away all of the greatest griefs, and after 2 or 3 years, the king finally married again. His second wife was a princess of undeniable beauty, but by no means of so amiable a disposition of the previous queen. In due time, a second prince was born, and the queen was devoured with rage at the thought that Prince Alphege came between her son and the throne. She took care, however, to conceal her jealous feelings from the king. At length, she could control herself no longer, so she sent a trusty servant to her old and faithful friend, the fairy of the mountain, to beg her to devise some means by which she might get rid of her stepson. The fairy replied that, much as she desired to be agreeable to the queen in every way, it was quite impossible for her to attempt anything against the young prince, who was under the protection of some greater power than her own. The good queen, on her side, watched carefully over her godson. She was obliged to do so from a distance, her own country being a remote one. But she was well informed of all that went on, knew all about the queen's wicked designs. She therefore sent the prince a large and splendid ruby, with injunctions to wear it at night and day, as it would protect him from all attacks, but added that the talisman only retained its power as long as the prince remained within his father's dominions. The wicked queen, knowing this, made every attempt to get the prince out of the country, but her efforts failed till one day, on accident, he did what she was incapable of accomplishing. The king had an only sister who was deeply attached to him, and who was married to the sovereign of a distant country. She had always kept up a close correspondence with her brother, and the accounts she heard of Prince Alphege made her long to become acquainted with so charming a nephew. She entreated the king to allow the prince to visit her, and after some hesitation, which was overruled by his wife, he finally consented. Prince Alphege was at this time 14 years old, and the handsomest and most engaging youth imaginable. In his infancy, he had been placed in the charge of one of the great ladies of the court, who, according to prevailing custom, acted first as his head nurse, and then as his governess. When he outgrew her care, her husband was appointed as his tutor and his governor, so that he never had been separated from the excellent couple, who loved him as tenderly as they did their only daughter, Zeta, and were warmly loved by him in return. When the prince set forth on his travels, it was but natural that this devoted couple should accompany him, and accordingly he started with them and attended by numerous retainers. For some time he traveled through his father's dominions, and all went well, But soon after passing the frontier, they had to cross a desert plain under a burning sun. They were glad to take shelter under a group of trees near, and here the prince complained of burning thirst. Luckily, a tiny stream ran close by, and some water was soon procured. But sooner had he tasted it than he sprang from his carriage and disappeared in a moment. In vain did all his anxious followers seek for him, but he was nowhere to be found. As they were hunting and shouting through the trees, a black monkey suddenly appeared on a point of a rock and said, "Poor sorrowing people, you are seeking your prince in vain. Return to your country and know that he will not be restored to you, for some time has failed to recognize him." With these words, he vanished, leaving the courtiers sadly perplexed. But as all their efforts to find the prince were useless, they had no choice but to go home, bringing with them the sad news, which so greatly distressed the king that he fell ill and died not long after. The queen, whose ambition was boundless, was delighted to see the crown on her son's head and to have power in her own hands. Her hard rule made her very unpopular, and it was commonly believed that she had made way with the Prince Alphege. Indeed, had the king, her son, not been deservedly beloved, a revolution would certainly have arisen. Meanwhile, the former governess of the unfortunate Alphege, who had lost her husband soon after the king's death, retired to her own house with her daughter, who, by the way, grew up a lovely and most lovable girl. And both continued to mourn the loss of their dear prince. The young king was devoted to hunting, and often indulged in his favorite pastime, attended by the noblest youths in the kingdom. One day, after a long morning's chase, he stopped to rest near a brook in the shade of a little wood, where a splendid tent had been prepared for him. Whilst at luncheon, he suddenly spied a little monkey of the greenest green, sitting on a tree and gazing so tenderly at him that he felt quite moved. He forbade his courtiers to frighten it, and the monkey, noticing how much attention was being paid him, sprang from bow to bow, and at length gradually approached the king, who offered him some food. The monkey took it very daintily and finally came to the table. The king took him on his knees and, delighted with his capture, brought him home with him. He would trust no one else with its care. And the whole court soon talked of nothing but the pretty green monkey. One morning, as Prince Alphege's governess and her daughter were alone together, a little monkey sprang in through an open window. He had escaped from the palace, and his manners were so gentle and caressing that Zadja and her mother soon got over the fright that he had given them. He had spent some time with them, and quite won their hearts by his insinuating ways. When the king discovered where he was and sent to fetch him back, but the monkey made such piteous cries and seemed so unhappy when anyone attempted to catch him, that the two ladies begged the king to leave him alone a little longer with them, to which he consented. One evening, as they sat by the fountain in the garden, the little monkey kept gazing at Zadja. with such sad and loving eyes that she and her mother could not think what to make of it. And they were still more surprised when they saw big tears rolling down his cheeks. The next day, both mother and daughter were sitting in the jasmine bower in the garden, and they began to talk of the green monkey and of his strange ways. The mother said, "My dear child, I can no longer hide my feelings from you. I cannot get the thought out of my mind that the green monkey is no other than our beloved Prince Alphege." Transformed in this strange fashion. I know the idea sounds wild, but I cannot get it out of my heart, and it leaves me no peace. As she spoke, she glanced up, and there sat the little monkey, whose tears and gestures seemed to confirm her words. The following night, the elder lady dreamt that she saw the good queen, who said, "Do not weep any longer, but follow my directions. Go into your garden and lift up the little marble slab at the foot of the great myrtle tree. You will find beneath it a crystal vase filled with a bright green liquid. Take it with you and place the thing which is at present most in your thoughts into a bath filled with roses, and rub it well with the green liquid." At these words the sleeper awoke, and lost no time in rising and hurrying to the garden, where she found all as a good queen had described. Then she hastened to rouse her daughter, and together they prepared a bath, for they would not let their woman know that they were about. Azadeh gathered quantities of roses, and when all was ready, they put the monkey into the large jasper bath, where the mother rubbed him all over with the green liquid. Their suspense was not long, for suddenly the monkey's skin dropped off, and there stood Prince Alphege, the handsomest and most charming of men. The joy of such a meeting was beyond words. After a time, the ladies begged the prince to relate his adventures, and he told them of all his sufferings in the desert, and when he was transformed. His only comfort had been the visits from the good queen, who at length had put him in the way of meeting his brother. Several days were spent in these interesting conversations, but at length Azadeh's mother began to think the best means for placing the prince upon the throne, which was his by right. The queen, on her side, was feeling very anxious. She had felt sure from the first that her son's pet monkey was no other than Prince Alphege, and she longed to put an end to him. Her suspicions were confirmed by the fairy of the mountain, and she hastened in tears to the king, her son. "I am informed," she cries, "that some ill-disposed people have raised up an impostor in the hopes of dethroning you. You must at once have him put to death." The king, who was very brave, assured the queen that he would punish the conspirators. He made careful inquiries into the matter, and thought it hardly possible that a quiet widow and a young girl would think of attempting anything of the nature of a revolution. He determined to go and see them, and to find the truth for himself. So, one night, without saying anything to the queen or his ministers, he set out of the palace where the two ladies lived, attended only by a small band of his followers. The two ladies were at a moment deep in conversation with Prince Alphege, and hearing the knocking so late at night, begged him to keep out of sight for a time. What was their surprise when the door was opened to see the king and his suite. "I know," said the king, "that you are plotting against my crown and person, and I have come to have an explanation from you." As she was about to answer, Prince Alphege, who had heard it all, came forward and said, "It is from me you must ask for an explanation, brother." He spoke with such grace and dignity that everyone gazed at him with mute surprise. At length the king, recovering from his astonishment at recognizing his brother, who had been lost some years before, exclaimed, "You are indeed my brother, and now that I have found you, take the throne to which I have no longer a right." So saying, he respectfully kissed the prince's hand. Alphege threw himself into his arms, and the brothers hastened to the royal palace, where in the presence of the entire court he received the crown from his brother's hand. To clear away any possible doubt, he showed the ruby which the good queen had given him in his childhood. As they were gazing at it, it suddenly split with a loud noise, and at the same moment the wicked queen expired. King Alphege lost no time in marrying his dear and lovely Zayda, and his joy was complete when the good queen appeared at his wedding. She assured him that the Fair of the Mountain had henceforth lost all power over him, and after spending some time with the good couple and bestowing them the most costly presents upon them, she retired back to her own country. King Alphege insisted on his brother sharing his throne, and they all lived to a good old age, universally beloved and admired. And now, a brief word from... Nah, I'm not going to say it. I'm just going to run ads again. Just because it's... I don't know how long the story is going to be, so I just going to be on the safe side. That and I'm testing a theory. A stream theory. No. String theory would be interesting, though. Okay. Ouch. And while things are going, I'm going to use stretch and hydrate. Got 26 seconds left. Just Twitch doesn't care as long as you get their 3 minutes an hour. And okay. That should be over again. Cool, cool, cool. Our next wondrous tale of beasts, the colony of cats, from the Crimson Fairy Book. Long, long ago, as far back as the time when animals spoke, there lived a community of cats in a deserted house they had taken possession of, not far from a large town. They had everything they could possibly desire for their comfort. They were well fed and well lodged, and if by any chance an unlucky mouse was stupid enough to venture into their way, they caught it, not to eat it, but for the pure pleasure of catching it. The old people of the town related how they had heard their parents speak of a time when the whole country was so overrun with rats and mice that there was not much of a grain of corn nor an ear of maize to be gathered in the fields. And it might be out of gratitude to the cats who got rid of the country of mice, and their descendants were allowed to live in peace. No one knows where they got the money to pay for everything, nor who paid for it. For all this happened so very long ago. But one thing is certain, they were rich enough to keep a servant, for though they lived very happily together, they did not scratch nor fight more than human beings would have done. They were not clever enough to do the housework themselves, and preferred at all events to have someone cook their meat, which they would have scorned to eat raw meat. Not only were they very difficult to please about the housework, but the most women quickly tired of living alone with only cats for their companions. Consequently, they never kept a servant long, and it had become a saying in the town, when anyone found herself reduced to her last penny, "I will go and live with the cats." So, many a poor woman actually did. Now, Zena was not happy at home, for her mother, who was a widow, was much fonder of her elder daughter, so that often the younger one fared very badly, and had not enough to eat, while the older could have everything she desired, and if Liza dared to complain, she was certain to have a good beating. At last the day came when she was at the end of her courage and patience, and exclaimed to her mother and sister, "As you hate me so much, you'll be glad to be rid of me. I am going to go live with the cats." "Be off with you!" cried her mother, seizing an old broom handle from behind the door. Poor Lizina did not wait to be told twice, but ran off at once and never stopped till she reached the door of the cat's house. Their cook had left them that very morning, with her face all scratched, as a result of a quarrel with the head of the house, that he had very neatly scratched out her eye. Azina, therefore, was warmed welcomely, and she set to work at once to prepare the dinner, not without many misgivings as to the taste of the cats, and whether she would be able to satisfy them. Going to and fro about her work, she found herself frequently hindered by constant successions of cats who appeared one after another in the kitchen to inspect the new servants. She had one in front of her feet, another perched on her back of the chair while she peeled the vegetables. A third sat on the table beside her, and a fifth or sixth prowled about among the pots and pans on the shelves against the wall. The air resounded with their purring, which meant that they were pleased with their new maid. But Lizena had not yet learned to understand their language, and often she did not know what they wanted her to do. However, she was a good, kind-hearted girl. She set to work to pick up the little kittens which tumbled about on the floor. She patched up quarrels, and she nursed her lap a big tabby, the oldest in the community, which had a lame paw. All these kindnesses could hardly fail to make a favorable impression on the cats, and it was even better after a while, when she had time to grow accustomed to their strange ways. Never had the house been kept so clean, their meats so well served, nor the sick cats so well cared for. After a time, they had a visit from an old cat, whom they all called their father, who lived by himself in a barn on the top of a hill, and came down from time to inspect the little colony. He was much taken aback with Lavinia, and inquired on first seeing her, "Are you well served by this nice, black-eyed little person?" And the cats answered him in one voice, "Oh, yes, Father Gato. We have never had so good a servant." At each of his visits, the answer was always the same. But after a time, the old cat, who was very observant, noticed that the little maid had grown to look sadder and sadder. "What is the matter, my child? Has anyone been unkind to you?" he asked one day when he found her crying in the kitchen. She burst into tears and answered her in sobs. "Oh, no. They're all very good to me, but I long for news from home, and I pine to see my mother and my sister." Old Gato, being a sensible old cat, understood the little servant's feelings. "You shall go home," he said, "and you shall not come back here unless you please. But first you must be rewarded for all your kind services to my children. Follow me down into the intercellar, where you have never yet been, for I always keep it locked and carry the key away with me." Zena looked around her in astonishment as they went down into the great vaulted cellar underneath the kitchen. Before her stood a big earthenware water jars, one of which contained oil, and the other liquid shining like gold. "In which of these jars shall I dip you?" asked Father Gato, with a grin that showed his sharp, white teeth, while his mustaches stood straight out on either side of his face. The little maid looked at the two jars from under her long, dark lashes. "In the oil jar," she answered timidly, thinking to herself, "I could not ask to be bathed in gold." But Father Gato replied, "No, no, you have deserved something better than that." And seizing her in his strong paws, he plunged her in the liquid gold. Wonder of wonders! When Lizena came out of the jar, she shone from head to foot like the sun in the heavens on a fine summer's day. Her pretty pink cheeks and long black hair kept their natural color. Otherwise, she had become like a statue of pure gold. Father Gato purred loudly with satisfaction. "Go home," he said, "and see your mother and sisters. But take care, if you hear the cocking of the crow, to turn towards it. If on the secondary the asp brays, you must look the other way." The little maid, having gratefully kissed the white paws of the old cat, set off for home. But just as she got near her mother's house, the cock crowed, and she quickly turned towards it. Immediately a beautiful gold star appeared on her forehead, crowning her glossy black hair. At the same time, the ass began to bray, but Linza took care not to look over the fence into the field where the donkey was feeding. Her mother and sister, who were in front of the house, uttered cries of admiration and astonishment when they saw her, and their cries became still louder when Lasagna, taking her handkerchief from her pocket, drew out a handkerchief of pure gold. For some days, the mother and her two daughters lived very happily together, for Lizena had given them everything she had brought away except the gold clothing, for that would not come off, in spite of all the efforts of her sister, who was madly jealous of her good fortune. The gold star, too, could not be removed from her forehead, but all the gold pieces she drew from her pockets had found way to the mother and sister.
I will go now and see what I can get out of the pussies,
said Peppina, the elder girl, one morning, as she took Lizena's basket and fastened her pockets into her own skirt.
I should like some of the cat's gold for myself, she thought.
And she left her mother's house before the sun rose. The cat colony had not yet taken another servant, for they knew they could never get one to replace Lizenia, whose loss they had not yet ceased to mourn. When they heard that Peppina was her sister, they all ran to meet her.
She is not the least like her, kittens whispered among themselves.
Hush, be quiet, the older cat said. All servants cannot be pretty. No, decidedly, she was not at all like Lizena. Even the most reasonable and large-minded of the cats soon acknowledged that. The very first day, she shut the kitchen door in the face of one of the tomcats who used to enjoy watching Lizena at her work. And a young and mischievous cat who jumped in by the open kitchen window was alighted on the table and got such a blow with a rolling pin that he squalled for an hour. With every day that passed, the household became more and more aware of its misfortune. The work was badly done, as the servant was surly and disagreeable. In the corners of the rooms there were collected heaps of dust, spiders' webs hung from the ceilings, and in front of the window panes. The beds were hardly ever made, and the feather beds, so beloved by the old and feeble cats, had never once been shaken since Lizena left the house. At Father Gatto's next visit, he found the whole colony in a state of uproar. Caesar has one paw so badly swollen that it looks as if it was broken, said one.
Peppina kicked him with her great wooden shoes on. Hector has an abscess in his back where a wooden chair was flung at him. And Agrippa's 3 little kittens have died of hunger beside their mother, because Peppina forgot them in the basket in the attic. There is no putting up with this creature. Do send her away, Father Gatto. Lizena herself would not be angry with us. She must know very well what her sister is like.
Come here, said Father Gatto in his most severe tones to Peppina, and he took her down into the cellar and showed her the same 2 great jars that he had shown Lizena. In which of these shall I dip you? He asked, and she made haste to answer,
In the liquid gold.
For she was no more modest than she was good and kind, or beautiful. Father Gatto's yellow eyes darted fire. You have not deserved it, he uttered in a voice like thunder, and seizing her, he flung her into the jar of oil, where she was nearly suffocated. When she came to the surface of the jar, screaming and struggling, the vengeful cat seized her again and rolled her in the ash heap on the floor. Then, when she rose, dirty, blinded, and disgusting to behold, he thrust her from the door, saying, Begone! And when you meet a braying ass, be careful to turn your head towards it.
Hmm. Stumbling and raging, Peppina set off for home, thinking herself fortunate to find a stick in the wayside with which to support herself. She was within sight of her mother's house when she heard in the meadow on the right the voice of a donkey loudly braying. Quickly, she turned her head towards it, and at the same time put her hand up to her forehead, where, waving like a plume, was a donkey's tail. She ran home to her mother at the top of her speed, yelling with rage and despair. And it took Zena 2 hours with a big basin of hot water and 2 cakes of soap to rid her of the layer of ashes with which Father Gatto had adorned her. As for the donkey's tail, it was impossible to get rid of. It was firmly fixed on her forehead, as was the golden star of Zena. Their mother was furious. She first beat Lizina unmercifully with the broom, and then she took to her mouth as well, and lowered her down into it, leaving her at the bottom, weeping and crying for help. Before this happened, however, the king's son, in passing the mother's house, had seen Lizina sitting sewing in the parlor, and had been dazzled by her beauty. After coming back 2 or 3 times, he at last ventured to approach the window and to whisper, in his softest voice, "Lovely maiden, will you be my bride?" And she answered, "I will." Duh. Next morning, when the prince arrived to claim his bride, he found her wrapped in a large white veil. "So it is that maidens are received from their parents' hands," said the mother, who hoped to make the king's son marry Peppina in place of her sister, and had fastened the donkey's tail around her head like a lock of hair under her veil. The prince was young and a little timid, stupid, so he made no objections and seated Peppina in the carriage beside him. Their way led past an old house inhabited by the cats, who were all in the window, for the report had got out that the prince was going to marry the most beautiful maiden in the world, whose forehead shone a golden star. And they knew that this could only be their adorned Lizina. As the carriage slowly passed in front of the old house, where the cats from all parts of the world seemed to be gathered, a song burst from every throat. Mew, mew, mew. Prince, look quick behind you. In the well is fair Lizina, and you've got nothing but Peppina. Cat songs. When he heard this, the coachman, who understood the cat's language better than the prince, for reasons, stopped his horses and asked, "Does your highness know what the Grimalkins are saying?" And the song broke forth again, louder than ever. With a turn of his head, the prince threw back the veil and discovered the puffed up, swollen face of Peppina, with a donkey's tail twisted around her head. "Ah, traitoress!" he exclaimed, and ordered the horses to turn. He turned around, and he drove the older daughter, quivering with rage, to the old woman who had sought to deceive him. With his hand on the hilt of his sword, he demanded Lizina in so terrific a voice that the mother hastened to the well and drew the prisoner back out. Azena's clothing and her stars shone so brilliantly that when the prince led her home to the king, his father, the whole palace was lit up. Next day, they were married and lived happily ever after. And all the cats, led by old Father Gato, were present at the wedding. Because cats. And another ad break. Maybe. Okay. So my wind block is sort of helping. Unfortunately, I'm using a blanket to redirect the airflow, so it's just keeping part of me colder. See, that was 3 stories? 2 stories? Let's see what I learned. Green monkey, corny cats. Okay, 3 stories. Monkey. And since we did a previous story about cats, the next one is going to be dogs. Because dogs. Okay. Ad should be over. At least I really hope it is. Our next wondrous tale of tales. Okay. That's just a weird way of putting it. But our next story is The Three Dogs, as told in the Green Fairy book. There was once upon a time a shepherd who had 2 children, a son and a daughter. When he was on his deathbed, he turned to them and said, "I have nothing to leave you but 3 sheep and a small house. Divide them between you as you like, but please don't quarrel over them, whatever you do." When the shepherd was dead, the brother asked his sister which she would like best, the sheep or the little house. And when she had chosen the house, he said, "Then I'll take the sheep, and go out and seek my fortune in the wide world. I don't see why I shouldn't be as lucky as many other who have set out in the same search. It won't be for nothing that I was born on a Sunday." And so he started on his travels, driving his 3 sheep in front of him, and for a long time it seemed as if fortune did not mean to favor him at all. One day he was sitting disconsolately on a crossroad, when a man suddenly appeared before him with 3 black dogs, each one bigger than the other. "Hello, my fine fellow," said the man. "I see you have 3 fat sheep. I'll tell you what. If you'll give them to me, I'll give you my 3 dogs." In spite of his sadness, the youth smiled and replied, "What would I do with your dogs? My sheep at least feed themselves, but I should have to find food for the dogs." "Ah, my dogs are not like other dogs," said the stranger. "They will feed you instead of you them, and will make your fortune. The smallest one is called Salt, and will bring you food whenever you wish. The second one is called Pepper, and will tear anyone to pieces who offers to hurt you.
And the great big strong one is called Mustard, and is so powerful that it will break iron or steel with his teeth. The shepherd at last let himself be persuaded, and gave the stranger his sheep. In order to test the truth of the statement about the dogs, he said once, "Salt, I am hungry." And before the words were out of his mouth, the dog had disappeared, and returned in a few minutes with a large basket full of the most delicious food. Then the youth congratulated himself on the bargain he had made, and continued the journey in the best of spirits. One day he met a carriage and a pair, all draped in black. Even the horses were covered with black trappings, and the coachman was clothed in crape from top to toe. Inside the carriage sat a beautiful girl in a black dress, crying bitterly. The horses advanced slowly and mournfully, with their heads bent on the ground. "Coachman, what's the meaning of all this grief?" asked the shepherd. At first, the coachman wouldn't say anything, but when the youth pressed him, he told him that a huge dragon dwelt in the neighborhood, and requiring yearly a sacrifice of a beautiful maiden. This year the lot had fallen on the king's daughter, and the whole country was filled with woe and lamentation in consequence. The shepherd felt very sorry for the lovely maiden, and determined to follow the carriage. In a little while it halted at the foot of a high mountain. The girl got out and walked slowly and sadly to meet her horrible fate. The coachman perceived that the shepherd wished to follow her, and warned him not to do so if he valued his life. But the shepherd wouldn't listen to his advice. When they had climbed about halfway up the hill, they saw a terrible-looking monster with the body of a snake and with huge wings and claws, coming towards him, breathing forth flames of fire and preparing to seize his victim. Then the shepherd called, "Pepper, come to the rescue!" And the second dog set upon the dragon, and after a fierce struggle bit it so sharply in the neck that the monster rolled over, and in a few moments breathed its last. Then the dog ate up all of the body, except its two front teeth, which the shepherd picked up and put in his pocket. The princess was quite overwhelmed with terror and joy, and fell fainting at the prince of her deliverer. When she recovered her consciousness, she begged the shepherd to return with her to her father, who would reward him richly. But the youth answered that he wanted to see something of the world, and he would return again in 3 years. And nothing would make him change his resolve. So the princess seated herself once more in her carriage, and bidding each other farewell, she and the shepherd separated. She to return home, and he to see the world. But while the princess was driving over a bridge, the carriage suddenly stood still, and the coachman turned around to her and said, "Your deliverer is gone, and doesn't thank you for your gratitude? It would be nice of you to make the poor fellow happy. Therefore, you may tell your father that it was I who slew the dragon, and if you refuse to,
I will throw you in the river, and no one will be any the wiser, for they think the dragon has devoured you. The maiden was in a dreadful state when she heard these words, but there was nothing for her to do but to swear that she would give out the coachman as her deliverer, and not to divulge the secrets to anyone. So they returned to the capital, and everyone was delighted when they saw the princess had returned unharmed. The black flags were taken down from all over the palace towers, and gay colored ones put up in their place, and the king embraced his daughter and her supposed rescuer with tears of joy, and turning to the coachman, he said, "You have not only saved the life of my child, but you have also freed the country from a terrible scourge. Therefore, it is only fitting that you should be richly rewarded. Therefore, take my daughter for your wife. But as she is still young, do not let the marriage be celebrated for another year." The coachman thanked the king for his graciousness, and was led away to be richly dressed and instructed in all the arts and graces that benefit his new position. But the poor princess wept bitterly, though she did not dare to confide her grief to anyone. When the year was over, she begged so hard for another year's respite that it was granted to her. But this year passed also, and she threw herself at her father's feet and begged so piteously for one more year that the king's heart was melted, and he yielded to her request. Much to the princess's joy, for she knew that her real deliverer would appear at the end of the third year. And so the year passed away like the other two, and the wedding day was fixed, and all the people were prepared to feast and make merry. But on the wedding day it happened that a stranger came to town with 3 black dogs. He asked what the meaning of all the feasting and fuss was, and they told him that the king's daughter was just going to be married to a man who had slain the terrible dragon. The stranger at once denounced the coachman as a liar, but no one would listen to him, and he was seized and thrown into a cell with iron doors. While he was laying on his straw pallet, pondering mournfully on his fate, he thought he heard a low whining of his dogs outside. Then an idea dawned on him, and he called out as loudly as he could, "Mustard, come to my help!" And in a second he saw the paws of the biggest dog at the window of a cell, and before he could count 2, the creature had bitten through the iron bars and stood beside him. Then they both let themselves out of the prison by the window, and the poor youth was free once more, though he felt very sad when he thought that another was soon to enjoy the reward that rightfully belonged to him. He felt hungry too, so he called his dog Salt and asked him to bring some food. The faithful creature trotted off, and soon returned with a table napkin full of the most delicious foods. And the napkin itself was embroidered with a kingly crown. The king had just seated himself at the wedding feast with all his court, when the dog appeared and licked the princess's hand in an appealing manner. With a joyful start, she recognized the beast and bound her own table napkin around his neck. Then she plucked up her courage and told her father the whole story. The king at once sent the servants to follow the dog, and a short time after the stranger was led into the king's presence. The former coachman grew as white as a sheet when he saw the shepherd, and falling on his knees, begged for mercy and pardon. The princess recognized her deliverer once and did not need proof of the 2 dragon's teeth which he drew from his pocket. The coachman was thrown into a dark dungeon, and the shepherd took his place at the princess's side. And this time, you may be sure, she did not beg for the wedding to be postponed. The young couple lived for some time in great peace and happiness, when suddenly one day the former shepherd bethought himself of his poor sister, and expressed a wish to see her again, and to let her share in his good fortune. So they sent a carriage to fetch her, and soon she arrived at the court and found herself once more in her brother's arms. Then one of the dogs spoke. "Our task is done. You have no more need for us. We only waited to see that you did not forget your sister and your prosperity." And with these words, the 3 dogs became 3 birds and flew away into the sky. Okay, I'm going to run controls one more time. Let's see how long this next story is. 11 pages. Okay. We'll do one more story after this quick break. Da, 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 da. I guess I could go to my BRX stream. So there's only me here anyway. Oh well. Looks like that's already rated out, so it's already gone for the night. And 8 seconds before we are back. Da 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 da. 1. And we should be back. I hope. That's one more story for the night. Then we shall see who we can raid. If we have anyone to raid. Because otherwise I will raid by myself. Which, whatever. Okay. Our final story for this evening. Jackal or Tiger from the Olive fairy book. One hot night in Hindustan, a king and queen lay awake in the palace in the midst of the city. Every now and then a faint air blew through the lattice, and they hoped they were going to sleep, but they never did. Presently they became more broad awake than ever at the sound of a howl outside the palace. "Listen to that tiger," remarked the king. "Tiger?" replied the queen. "Why should there be a tiger inside the city? It was only a jackal." "I'll tell you it was a tiger," said the king. "And I tell you that you were dreaming if you thought it was anything but a jackal," answered the queen. "I say it was a tiger," cried the king. "Don't contradict me." "Nonsense!" snapped the queen. "It was a jackal." And this dispute waxed so warm that the king said at last, "Very well, we'll call the guard and ask. And if it was a jackal,
I'll leave this kingdom to you and go away. And if it was a tiger, then you shall go, and I will marry a new wife.
Hmm. As you like, answered the queen. There isn't any doubt which it was.
So the king called the two soldiers who were on guard and put the question to them. But while the dispute was going on, the king and the queen got so excited and talked so loud that the guards had hardly heard nearly all they had said. And one man said to the other, "Mind you, declare that the king is right. It certainly was a jackal, but if we so, the king will probably not keep his word about going away, and we shall get in trouble, and we had better take his side." To this, the other agreed, and the king was asked them what animal they had seen. Both guards said it was certainly a tiger, and that the king, of course, was right, as he always was. The king made no remark, but sent for a palanquin and ordered the queen be placed in it, bidding the forebears of the palanquin to take her a long way off into the forest and there leave her. In spite of her tears, she was forced to obey, and away the bears went for 3 days and 3 nights until they came to a dense wood. There they set down the palanquin with the queen in it, and they started walking home again. Now the queen thought to herself that the king could not mean to send her away for good, and that as soon as he got over his fit of temper, he would summon her back. So she stayed quite still for a long time, listening with all her ears for approaching footsteps, but heard none. After a while she grew nervous, for she was all alone, and put her head out of the palanquin and looked about her. Day was just breaking, and birds and insects were beginning to stir. The leaves rustled in the warm breeze. But although the queen's eyes wandered in all directions, there was no sign of any human being. And then her spirit gave way, and she began to cry. Now, it so happened that close to the spot where the queen's palanquin had been set down, there dwelt a man who had a tiny farm in the midst of the forest, where he and his wife lived alone, far from any neighbors. As it was hot weather, the farmer had been sleeping on the flat roof of the house, but was awakened by the sound of the weeping. He jumped up and ran downstairs as fast as he could, and into the forest towards the place where the sound came from, and there he found the palanquin. "Oh, poor soul that weeps!" cried the farmer, standing a little way off. "Who are you?" At this salutation from a stranger, the queen grew silent, dreading she knew not why. "Oh, that you weep," repeated the farmer. "Fear not to speak to me, for you are to me as a daughter. Tell me, who are you?" His voice was so kind that the queen gathered up her courage and spoke. And when she had told her story, the farmer called his wife, who led her on in their house and gave her food to eat and a bed to lie on. And in the farm, a few days later, a little prince was born, and by his mother's wish was named Amir Ali. Thank you for the hydrating stretch. How you doing, kitty cat? Years passed without a sign from the king, His wife might have been dead for all he seemed to care, though the queen had still lived with the farmer, and the little prince had by this time grown up into a strong, handsome young youth. Out of the forest, they seemed far from the world. Very few ever came near them, and the prince was continually begging his mother and the farmer to be allowed to go away and seek adventure and to make his own living. But she and the wise farmer always counseled him to wait, until at last, when he was 18 years of age, they had not the heart to forbid him any longer. So he started off one early morning with a sword by his side, a big brass pot of water, a few pieces of silver, and a galeo or a two-stringed bow in his hand, with which to shoot birds as he traveled. Many a weary mile he tramped day after day, until one morning he saw before him such a forest as that in which he had been born and bred, and stepped joyfully into it, like one who goes to meet an old friend. Presently, as he made his way through a thicket, he saw a pigeon, which he thought would make a good dinner. So he fired a pellet at it from his galeo, but missed, and the pigeon fluttered away with a startled clatter. At the same instant, he heard a great clamor from beyond the thicket, and on reaching that spot, he found an ugly old woman, streaming wet, and crying loudly as she lifted from her head an earthen vessel with a hole in it from which the water was pouring. When she saw the prince with his galeo in his hand, she called out,
"Oh, wretched one! Why must you choose an old woman like me to play your pranks upon? Where am I to get a fresh pitcher instead of this one that you have broken with your foolish tricks? And how am I to go far for water when the one journey wearies me?"
"But, mother," replied the prince, "I played no trick upon you. I did but shoot at a pigeon that should have served me for dinner, and as my pellet missed it, it must have broken your pitcher. But in exchange you shall have my brass pot, and that will not break easily. As for getting water, tell me where to find it, and I'll fetch it for you while you dry your garments in the sun, and carry it whither you will." At this, the old woman's face brightened. She showed him where to seek the water, and when he returned a few moments later with it, she led him this way without a word, and he followed. In a short while they came to a hut in the forest, and as they drew near it, Amir Ali beheld in the doorway the loveliest damsel his eyes had ever looked upon. At the sight of the stranger, she drew her veil around her and stepped into the hut. As much as he wished to see her again, Amir Ali could think of no excuse by which to bring her back. And so, with a heavy heart, he made a salutation and bade the old woman farewell. But when he had gone a little way, she called after him.
"If you're ever in trouble or danger, come to where you now stand and cry, 'Fairy of the forest, fairy of the forest, come help me now,' and I will listen to you."
The prince thanked her and continued his journey, but he thought little of the old woman's saying, and much of the lovely damsel. Shortly afterwards he arrived at a city, and as he was now in great straits, having come to the end of his money, he walked straight to the palace of the king and asked for employment. The king said he had plenty of servants and wanted none more, but the young man pleaded so hard that at last the Rajah was sorry for him, and promised that he should enter his bodyguard on the condition that he would undertake any service which was especially difficult or dangerous. This was just what Amir Ali wanted, and he agreed to do whatever the king might wish. Soon after this, on a dark and stormy night, when the river roared beneath the palace walls, the sound of a woman weeping and wailing was heard above the storm. The king ordered a servant to go and see what was the matter, but the servant, falling on his knees in terror, begged that he might not be sent on such an errand, particularly on a night so wild, when evil spirits and witches were sure to be around. Indeed, so frightened was he that the king, who was very kind-hearted, bade another to go in his stead. But each one showed the same strange fear. Then Amir Ali stepped forward. "This is my duty, your majesty," he said. "I will go." The king nodded, and off he went. The night was as dark as pitch, and the wind blew furiously and drove the rain into sheets into his face. But he made his way down to the ford under the palace walls and stepped into the flooded water. Inch by inch and foot by foot he fought his way across, now nearly swept off his feet by some sudden swirl or eddy, now narrowly escaping being caught in the branches of some floating tree that came tossing and swinging down the stream. At length he emerged, panting and dripping wet, on the other side. Close by the bank stood a gallows, and on the gallows hung the body of some evildoer, whilst the foot of it came to the sound of sobbing that the king had heard. Amir Ali was so grieved for the one who wept there that he thought nothing of the wildness of the night or of the roaring river. As for ghosts and witches, they had never troubled him. So he walked up to the gallows where crouched the figure of the woman. "What ails you?" he said. Now, the woman was not really a woman at all, but a horrid kind of witch who really lived in Witchland, who had no business on earth. If ever a man strayed into Witchland, the ogresses used to eat him up. And this old witch thought she would like to catch a man for supper. And that is why she had been sobbing and crying in hopes that someone out of pity might come to her rescue. So, when Amir Ali questioned her, she replied,
Kind sir, it is my poor son who hangs upon the gallows. Help me to get him down, and I will bless you forever."
Amir Ali thought her voice sounded rather eager than sorrowful, and he suspected that she was not telling the truth. So he determined to be very cautious. "That will be rather difficult," he said, "for the gallows is high, and we have no ladder."
But if you will just stoop down and let me climb upon your shoulders," answered the old witch, "I think I could reach him."
And her voice now sounded so cruel that Amir Ali was sure that she intended some evil. But he only said, "Well, we will try." With that he drew his sword, pretending that he needed to lean upon it, and bent so that the old woman could clamber on his back, which she did rather nimbly. Then suddenly he felt a noose slipping over his neck, and the old witch sprang from his shoulders and onto the gallows, crying,
"Now, foolish one, I have got you, and will kill you for my supper."
But Amir Ali gave a swoop upwards with his sharp sword and cut the rope that she had slipped round his neck, and not only cut the cord, but also cut the old woman's foot as it dangled above him. With a yell of pain and anger, she vanished into the darkness. Amir Ali then sat down to collect himself a little, and felt upon the ground by his side an anklet that had eventually fallen off of the old woman's foot. He put this in his pocket, and as the storm had by this time passed over, he made his way back to the palace. When he had finished his story, he took the anklet from his pocket and handed it to the king, who, like everyone else, was amazed at the glory of the jewels which composed it. Indeed, Amir Ali himself was astounded, for he had slipped it into his pockets in the dark and had not looked at the piece. The king was delighted at its beauty, and having praised and rewarded Amir Ali, gave the anklet to his daughter, a proud and spoiled princess. Now, in the woman's apartment of the palace there hung 2 cages, in one of which was a parrot, and in the other a starling. And these 2 birds could talk as well as human beings. They were both pets of the princess, who always fed them herself, and the next day, as she was walking grandly about with her treasure tied around her ankle, she heard the starling say to the parrot,
Tote,
that was the parrot's name.
How do you think the princess looks in a new jewel? Think, snapped the parrot, who was cross because they hadn't given him a bath that morning. I think she looks like a washerwoman's daughter, with one shoe on and the other off. Why doesn't she wear 2 of them, instead of going about with one leg adorned and the other empty?
When the princess heard this, she burst into tears, sending for her father, who declared she must get another anklet to wear on the other leg, or she would die of shame. So the king sent for Amir Ali and told him that he must get a second anklet, exactly like the first, within a month, or he would be hanged, for the princess would certainly die from disappointment. Poor Amir Ali was greatly troubled at the king's command, but he thought to himself that he had, at any rate, a month to lay his plans. He left the palace at once and inquired of everyone where the finest jewels were to be got, but though he sought night and day, he never found one to compare with the anklets. At last a week remained, and he was in sore difficulty, when he remembered the fairy of the forest, and determined to go without loss of time to seek her. Therefore he went away, and after a day's travelling he reached the cottage in the forest, and standing where she had stood, the old woman called to him, and he cried, "Fairy of the forest, fairy of the forest, help me, help me!" Then there appeared in the doorway the beautiful girl he had seen before, whom in all his wanderings he had never forgotten. "What is the matter?" she asked, in a voice soft that he listened like one dumbstruck. She had to repeat the question before he could answer. Then he told her his story, and she went in within the cottage and came back with 2 wands and a pot of boiling water. The 2 wands she planted in the ground about 6 feet apart, and then, turning to him, she said, "I am going to lie between these 2 wands. You must then draw your sword and cut off my foot. And as soon as you have done that, you must seize it and hold it over the cauldron, and every drop of blood that falls into the water will become a jewel. You must change the wands so that one that stood by my head is at my feet, and the one at my feet stands by my head, and place the severed foot against the wound, and it will heal, and I will become quite well again." At first, Amir Ali declared that he would sooner be hanged 20 times over than to treat her so roughly, but at length she persuaded him to do her bidding. He nearly fainted himself with horror when he found that, after a cruel blow which lopped her foot off, she lay as one lifeless. But he held the severed foot over the cauldron, and as drops of her blood fell from it, he saw each turn in the water into shining gems. His heart took courage, and as he saw each... Very soon, there were plenty of jewels in the cauldron, and he quickly changed the wands and placed the severed foot against the wound, and immediately the two parts became as one again. Then the maiden opened her eyes, sprang to her feet, and drawing her veil about her, ran into the hut, and would not come out to speak to him any more. For a long while he waited, and as she did not appear, he gathered up the precious stones and returned to the palace. He easily got someone to set the jewels and found that they were enough to make not only one, but 3 rare and beautiful anklets, and these he duly presented to the king on the very day that his month of grace was over. The king embraced him warmly and made him such rich gifts, and the next day the vain princess put 2 anklets on each foot and strutted up and down, admiring herself in the mirrors that lined her bedroom.
"Oh, Tate,"
cried the starling,
"how do you think our princess looks now in these fine jewels?"
"Ugh," growled the parrot, who was really always cross in the mornings, and never recovered his temper until after lunch. "She's got all her beauty at one end of her now. If she had a few more of those fine gewgaws around her neck and the wrist, she would look better. But now, to my mind, she looks more than ever like a washerwoman's daughter dressed up." Parrots. Poor princess. She wept and stormed and raved until she made herself quite ill. And then she declared to her father that unless she had bracelets and a necklace to match the anklets, she would surely die. Such a princess. Again, the king sent for Amir Ali and ordered him to get a necklace and bracelets to match those anklets within a month, or he would be put to a cruel death. And again Amir Ali spent nearly the whole month searching for the jewels, but in vain. At length he made his way to the hut in the forest, and stood and cried, "Fairy of the forest, fairy of the forest, help me, help me." Once more the beautiful maiden appeared at the summons and asked what he wanted. And when he told her, she must do exactly as he had done before the first time. Except now he must cut off both her hands and her head. Her words turned Amir Ali pale with horror. But she reminded him that no harm would come to her before, and at last she consented to do as she bade him. From her severed hands and head fell there into the cauldron bracelets and chains of rubies and diamonds and emeralds and pearls that surpassed any that were ever seen. Then the head and the hands were joined on the body, and neither left sign nor scar. Full of gratitude, Amir Ali tried to speak to her, but she ran into the house and would not come back, and he was forced to leave her and away go laden with the jewels. On the appointed day, Amir Ali produced the necklace and the bracelets, each more beautiful and priceless than the last. The king's astonishment knew no bounds, and as for his daughter, she was nearly mad with joy. The very next morning she put all her finery, and thought that now, at least, that disagreeable parrot could not find a fault with her appearance, and she listened eagerly when she heard the starling say,
"Oh, Tote, how do you think our princess is looking now?"
"Very fine, no doubt," grumbled the parrot. "But what is the use of dressing up like that for oneself only? She ought to have a husband. Why doesn't she marry the man who got her all those splendid things?" Then the princess sent for her father and told him that she wished to marry Amir Ali. "My dear child," said the father, "you are really very difficult to please, and want something new every day. It certainly is time you married someone, and if you choose this man, of course he shall marry you." So the king sent for Amir Ali, and told him that within a month he proposed to do him the honor of marrying him to the princess, and making him heir to the throne. On hearing this speech, Amir Ali bowed low and answered that he had done and would do all the king of service lay in his power, save only one thing. The king, who considered his daughter's hands a prize for any man, flew into a passion, and the princess was more furious still. Amir Ali was instantly thrown into the most dismal prison they could find, and ordered to be kept there until the king had time to think in what way he should be put to death. When the day came, all the court was gathered together, and a great crowd assembled of men, young and old, who thought that they had a good chance as anyone else to gain both the throne and the princess. As soon as the king was seated, he called upon an usher to summon the first claimant. But just then, a farmer who stood up in front of the crowd cried out that he had a petition to offer. "Well, hasten then," said the king. "I have no time to waste." "Your Majesty," said the farmer, "has now lived and administered justice long in this city, and will know that the tiger is the king of beasts, hunts only in the forests, while jackals in every place where there is something to be picked up." "What is all this? What is all this?" asked the king. "This man must be mad." "Now, your Majesty," answered the farmer, "I would only remind your Majesty that there are plenty of jackals gathered today to try and claim your daughter in the kingdom. Every city has sent them, and they wait hungry and eager. But do not, O king, mistake or pretend again to mistake the howl of a jackal for the hunting cry of a tiger." The king turned, first red and then pale. "There is," continued the farmer, "a royal tiger bred in the forest who is the first and only true claim to your throne." "Where? What do you mean?" answered the king, growing pale as he listened. "In prison," replied the farmer. "If your Majesty will clear this court of the jackals, I will explain." "Clear the court," commanded the king, and very unwillingly the visitors left the palace. "Now tell me what riddle this is," he said. Then the farmer told the king and his ministers how he had rescued the queen and brought up Amir Ali, and fetched the old queen herself, whom he hid outside. At the sight of her, the king was filled with shame and self-reproach, and wished he could have lived his life over again and not have married the daughter of the mother of the proud princess, who caused him endless trouble until her death. My days passed, said he, and he gave up his crown to his son Amir Ali, who went once more and called to the forest fairy to provide him with a queen to share his throne. There is only one person I will marry, said he, and this time the maiden did not run away, but agreed to be his wife. So the two were married, and without delay, and lived long and reigned happily. As for the old woman whose pitcher Amir Ali had broken, she was the forest maiden's fairy godmother, and when she no longer needed to look after the girl, she gladly returned to fairyland. The old king has never been heard to contradict his wife anymore. If he even looks as if he does not agree with her, she smiles to him and says, "Is it the tiger, then, or the jackal?" And he has not another word to say. Oh, that's awesome. So it's all the guards' fault, really. They didn't want to be punished, so they sided with the king, and all this crap happened. And Sam, you missed the story about the cat colony. It was one or two stories before this one. I don't know. I only read 4 stories. But now I'm gonna find someone to raid. Unless you know anyone's on. Ah, Jessica's on. Ow. Frickin' mosquito. So, oh, that's loud. That's already dusk. So I can type properly. Follower message. Subscriber message. And Red Duskwalker. So, thank everyone for lurking, listening, and whatnot. And I don't know if you saw what I did to my stream ending screen, but I like it. It was too cute to not use, so. guess I will see you in dusks. Everyone else, have a good night, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Just have a good day. And I will see you again. Ta-ta.